Hi, I'm attorney Renee Osipov with Chelle Law, and we assist parents, guardians, and students who are having issues surrounding special education or 504 plan accommodations. In this video, I am just broadly going over what is a 504 plan. So to go into it, I'll explain what is a 504 plan, what laws apply, who can get one, and what is included. So first, what is a 504 plan? So 504 plans are legally binding accommodations that a school in the public school or charter school setting must provide for students who have either a mental or physical impairment that substantially limit some type of life activity within the school setting. 504 plans are codified in federal statutes, specifically the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So in this act, it specifies that public schools have to provide these accommodations because if they don't, then they would actually be discriminating against individuals who have disabilities. So 504 plans are a little bit different than an IEP. Sometimes they're spoken about interchangeably, but there are differences between a 504 plan and an IEP. So a 504 plan is just accommodations that are going to be provided to that student within the educational environment. An IEP specifically may have accommodations, but additionally, IEP is more for children or students who need special education. So they need pulled out and specialized instruction. 504, the student may be in the general education classroom the entire day. They just need specific accommodations to help with their impairments. So that's basically what a 504 plan is. They're normally pretty straightforward. They're written almost like a contract because they basically are. The school is agreeing to provide those services. And then there may be observations or there may be diagnoses that are included in the document itself, who the team members are. Normally, this could be your special education coordinator as well. Sometimes they do both. Administration, general education teacher for sure. Parents or guardians, they are part of the team. So this is a big misconception. Parents think that they are just there to be presented with this 504 plan, but you're actually a valued member of the team. So the team members will be listed on there as well. And then specifically the accommodations. So what type of accommodations are going to be provided for the student and how often. 504 plans are also good for 3 years, but there's typically a 1-year annual meeting. So it would just address where the student is, if their impairment has gotten better or worse. Sometimes students who have maybe an accident, car accident, something like that, where they have a TBI or they have some type of impairment, but it's later healed, or there's no longer a need for those accommodations, then the 504 plan may not be needed anymore. But after every 3 years, then the evaluation process has to be handled again. So then the student would be evaluated. They would look at the data, the student's diagnosis, any of the impairments, and they would go through those accommodations and see, are those a good fit? Do we need to add more? Do we need to add less? Or do we need to tailor the current accommodations to meet the needs of the student better? 504 plans also address the whole in-school environment. So this may mean transportation to and from school. This could mean transitions in the hallway, specials. So if the child is having impairments maybe for physical education, PE, or art, fine motor skills, music, for sensory disorders, all of those things can be addressed in a 504 plan. That's what's great about them. Also, lunchtime, bathroom breaks, anything where there would be a substantial impairment from that from the student that they need accommodations for, that all can be written into the 504 plan. So a 504 plan can be very expansive. So think outside of just the general education classroom. Now, also, we can talk about how a student qualifies for for a 504 plan. So the law states that a child must or student must have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So this is different than an IEP. An IEP, the diagnoses must fit within one of the 13 categories. For a 504 plan, you can have any mental or physical impairment. But the second part is it has to substantially limit a major life activity. So that would be something inside the classroom. So a couple examples, if someone is a paraplegic and they're in a wheelchair, they have a physical impairment. So there would need to be accommodations in the classroom. What would that look like? Potentially that they were able to sit in the front of the class, that they had a cleared area to and from, that they were maybe able to sit in a specific part of the classroom, things like that. A mental impairment. So this one may be, I would say the most common is anxiety. So if a child has a diagnosis of anxiety and it substantially limits them in the classroom, maybe specifically around taking exams, then accommodations can be written. So maybe that student is able to take that exam in a quiet place outside of the classroom, or maybe they're given double the time to complete it. Maybe it's read out loud to the student. Maybe the student is given study guides or prompts. Really, the possibilities are endless with 504 plans. So that's another great thing. It's completely tailored to meet the needs of the student. And so I've given you some examples of accommodations that are written within the 504 plan, but let's kind of go over what's a good accommodation, what makes a good accommodation, and what makes a bad accommodation. So a good accommodation is going to be tailored to meet that student's needs. So I just gave the example of a child with anxiety maybe needs extended time on the exam or a quiet place. It's important to know what's actually causing the child's anxiety. So is it just the environment? So then the accommodation would be tailored to them, where it would be that they were allowed to take it in a different place. Maybe it's the pressure of the time, and so they get stressed out about that. So then it would be that they get additional time. Another good example of an accommodation is some way that the child can cue the educator whenever they need this accommodation. So for example, if a child has anxiety and they feel like maybe they are going to have an anxiety attack or they need to remove themselves from the classroom, the accommodation would be written that the student would give a specific cue. So maybe that's giving the teacher a thumbs up or a 1 or a code word, or they have a slip of paper that they can come and hand to the educator. And so that way, no one in the class really knows what's going on. The child isn't singled out, but they're getting the accommodations that they need. The educator is clued into what's going on, and the student is able to communicate that clearly. And then the last part of the accommodations, what makes a good accommodation, is it's written clearly so that anyone in the school can fulfill that accommodation. So for example, if a substitute is brought in for the day, they should be able to read the 504 plan and know exactly how to implement those accommodations. And they should know it quickly without having to ask anyone or single out the student. So examples of bad accommodations. So 1, singling out the student. So if a child is having anxiety, they may actually have more anxiety to raise their hand and ask the teacher if they can leave the classroom because they feel like they're going to have a panic attack. Now, all of their peers know, and it can, cause more anxiety to that student. So it's better just to, like I said, have some sort of cue that the educator and the student know and no one else does. Also, when accommodations aren't specific. So I gave a prior example of a child being able to have double the time on the exam. A lot of 504 plans I have seen say extended time on exams. Well, how much extended time? Is it double? Is it triple? Are they allowed to spend the whole day on that exam? Is it up to the teacher's discretion? If a substitute is there, will they know how much extended time? See, it's pretty vague, so it's hard to know. And if the educator's out or someone else is stepping in for the day, How did they implement that? So those are some examples of just bad accommodations. The other thing is the forgotten accommodations. So a lot of times when parents or 504 plan teams are drafting the 504 accommodations, they only are looking inside the general education classroom. Look outside. Where are there issues? Is it in the hallway? Does the child maybe need prompts that they're going to be transitioning? Do they need an aide or staff member to escort them in the hallway? The biggest one I think I see is cafeteria. It's definitely overlooked all the time. So if a student has sensory processing disorder or anxiety, cafeterias are very loud places. They're smelly places, they're busy. And so when children are having issues with overstimulation or sensory processing, the cafeteria can be a very scary place. So they may need accommodations within the cafeteria. So what would that look like? Maybe they're allowed to sit in a specified area every day. Maybe they're allowed to eat their lunch outside of the cafeteria because it's just too much overstimulation for them. Also, specials like we talked about, PE or art, those fine motor skills, therapy. If therapy is getting brought in, that should be written in however minutes or what the frequency is that they're going to receive that therapy, maybe PT or OT. So these are all things you want to remember. But a 504 plan is there to help that student who has an impairment. The possibilities are endless. You can get very creative on a 504 plan, and parents do have a say-so. They're a valued member of the team, and you actually have legal rights and remedies to hold the school accountable if they're not providing those accommodations, which they had agreed to, or if they're not wanting to give a 504 plan at all. They feel like the child has been evaluated and doesn't need one. And I have tons of videos on all of this, and you can check it out at our website. All of that is in the description below the video. You can also set up a consultation with me, and I'm happy to help either revise a current 504 plan or help draft accommodations for a new 504 plan. So I'm here and I'm happy to help. Thanks.